Cool. Well, thank you so much. I was really excited to be asked by Linda to join this track at Wade and to get to talk about ways that your district can support food access in your community. This is a part of working at Thurston CD that I really enjoy, and I love getting to share ideas, and I hope to be able to hear some ideas from y'all today too. So my name is Nora White, as Linda kindly shared, and I am the Education and Outreach Specialist at Thurston CD. I also am a farmer here in Thurston County. I raise sheep, and I also raise pastured poultry. And as of this week, I just completed my graduate research at UW-Tacoma, which was really focused on the role of food in creating meaning out of people's pandemic and quarantine experiences. So food is a big passion of mine and is something that I focus on in both my work and my life outside of work. So I'm very happy to get to talk with you all about it today. Here at Thurston CD, we've been working with local residents since 1947, and we serve residents of Thurston County who reside upon the indigenous lands of the Nisqually, Chehalis, and Squaxin peoples. We are going to talk about a couple different things today. The first one is just assessing your community's food system and finding your place within that. We're going to talk about some examples from Thurston CD of how to support food systems and how to support food access, and that's going to include talking about community and school gardens, adaptive and accessible education models, infrastructure projects, and unconventional partnerships. And then as Kelsey shared at the beginning, I did create a handout, and so my hope is at the end you'll be able to look at that handout while we're all in the session together and maybe either work on it or just kind of see some of the questions that I've posed in there. And hopefully that gets you thinking a little bit about how your district can work on food access. And we can hopefully kind of open that up for a little bit of chat, however that works best in this GoToWebinar, and question asking at the end too. There you go. Before we get started, I just want to show you some examples. So before we get into that worksheet, I want to show you some examples of how our district has done this, but I also want to know a little bit about what you already do or where your district is at. So if Stephanie, if you could pull my first poll question up, that would be great. And my question is, please let me know where is your CD already, is your CD already supporting food access in any way? So please, if you could take just a moment to answer that, that would be great.
Good, we're seeing folks fill out. Remember, you just click one of those two answers that she's got. Got about 60% of you who voted. Just take a couple more seconds. All right. It looks like most of you have voted. Steph, do you want to go ahead and report out what the poll says?
Yeah, so 73% of our responders say that yes, their CD already supports food access, and then 27% said no.
Okay, awesome. That is really interesting. That's cool to know. And I'll be really curious at the end if some of the examples I give from our district resonate or match with what you're already doing at your district, if it gives you new ideas, or if you are not currently engaging in food access work, maybe I hope these help you come up with some ideas that might fit for your community or some pathways forward. That's the goal. So the first thing we're going to talk about is assessing your current role in your local food system and what that can look like. So what are you already doing? As 73 approximately % of you said you're already doing something involved in local food work and local food access. What does that look like? Making sure you have a firm understanding of what everybody in your organization is doing and how they're engaging is really important. Look at how food systems work and meet how food systems work might meet your CD's strategic and annual plans. Something important documents that all of our districts have. How does engaging in this work help meet either goals in that or larger plans that your board has? Funding, we all know this is an important part of doing work. So do you have existing funding to do work within food systems? If you don't, Are there funding opportunities that you can look for and apply for? Are you the person who applies for that? Do you need to work with someone else in your office who does most of those grant applications? Again, kind of it's some internal work and looking. Meet with other stakeholders. Who else in your community is doing local food system work? One of my favorite things about districts is that we're all so different from each other because the communities we work with are so different. So who else in your local community is doing food system work? That might look really different than who in my community is doing food system work. Ask producers and community members how you should participate. I think this is an important thing to do, even if you answered yes, you already are working within the food system. Sometimes this might mean applying for a grant that is more of a planning grant. You know, you see those grants that come out like planning, implementation, and maybe that means going back and applying for one of those planning grants in order to support your staff in looking at your local food system more, asking some more questions, and looking for funders who offer those kind of tiers of funding can be really useful, because then you do those planning and then you can apply for infrastructure or implementation grants after that too. And you've kind of, you can be a competitive applicant because you've ground truthed the work that you're planning to do through a planning grant. But when you're doing those questions and when you're checking in with who else in your system, in your local food system might be doing work, it's important to question things like, how does your work, is it cohesive with other regional plans? What else is your county and city governments locally, how are they being involved in food access? And can you partner with them more? And then is there other work that Extension or other services are offering that is similar? You know, making sure that what you're doing is appropriate to not only your strategic and annual plans and your staff's areas of expertise and interest, but how does it mesh with what other organizations are doing? So with these things in mind, I'm going to share some of the specific projects and the ways that TCD has engaged with local food systems and with supporting food access. But I think these are some good questions, and you'll see these kind of come up in that handout again that's at the end of this workshop. One way we at TCD have been involved in food access is through the support of community and school gardens. For several years, we've offered technical assistance to school gardens in the form of soil testing, and then also supported teachers in connecting with each other and seeing the kinds of programs they're offering through doing some really fun summer tours of local school gardens. And I think we're going to get to do those again this summer, which is really exciting. This has been a great way to share best practices around community and school gardens, really see the local impact that has for students and for families in doing those tours. This picture on the right here is from the garden that is at the youth detention facility here, at the juvie facility, and they have an amazing rehabilitation program through their garden. And so we've gotten to share that with local teachers also, and that's been really awesome. And that garden is just a few blocks from our office. So getting to be involved with projects like that and see how we can offer technical assistance has been a great way we've been able to support food access. That garden in particular grows all of their produce for the local food bank. And I should say involvement with those school gardens and those tours has been highly dependent upon partnerships with both local school districts and the local food bank. Our involvement in the last year with community gardens has really expanded because we applied for and were awarded an NACD Urban Agriculture Conservation Initiative grant. And through that, we've done focused education and assistance with residents in the Yelm area of Thurston County. So that is kind of southeast of Olympia and right on the edge of Pierce County. Through that, we created a project called Homegrown Yelm, and our focus has really been doing both education as well as technical assistance for the creation of a community garden there. I had originally intended to apply for that grant in 2017, and it just wasn't a good fit for our district at that time. So when I revisited the application in 2019, I really wanted to check and make sure that it was still relevant and still helpful to the Yelm area. So that goes back to kind of, again, examining your position within the community and who else is doing that work. And when I went back to look at that, I discovered that the organization Bounty for Families had formed and started doing a lot of food systems work in Yelm specifically in that time. So I brought the project to them before even submitting the application. And through that grant that we were subsequently awarded, we've been able to support local food access through both these educational programs that I'll talk about next, and the development of a new community garden that is now in this first growing season, growing very successfully produce both for local community members to harvest and that we are weekly harvesting and taking to one of the local food pantries as well. This garden has been awesome. This is the site in the Yelm City Park. There used to be a building there that they tore down a long time ago. So we did a bunch of visioning together to figure out what it was going to look like. And now it is coming to fruition. This was in the winter as we were building garden beds. And it looks even bigger and way more wild than this now because there's so much more produce growing. So it has been a really fun site to get to see blossom, literally, and see how excited that community is about accessing that local food and learning about it. So education and gardening was really a primary focus of that NACD grant as well. And I believe that education related to food systems really needs to take into account the fact that our food system is not equitable. And this means that if you're offering programming, working with partners to put on a workshop or a demonstration, or creating educational materials about food access and growing food, you might want to consider how your contribution to local food systems can work to combat that inequity. And one way we've done that is to really focus on adapting our education to be increasingly accessible. And honestly, being stuck at home, working from home, as I am pictured here doing, and I'm doing right now, during COVID has been a great opportunity for us to really focus on how to increase accessibility in our programming. Myself and some other staff were able to continue offering a lot of virtual workshops pretty much right off the bat last spring, mostly through this NACD grant. And one thing I'll mention that I think has maybe come up in some other tracks this Wade as well is that we took advantage of the Kathy Angel presentation and workshop about virtual programming, and that was really helpful. So if you have access to that or that comes up again, I would highly recommend it. Some of the adaptations that we've done, both coming out of that training as well as just of our own accord, including closed captioning in our workshops, Spanish language translation where possible, incorporating activities into our workshops, offering workshops in a series format, including these resource folders that I'll talk about in a moment here, and then recording and having our slideshows available after the fact. So I'm going to go through these adaptations a little bit, and keep in mind as I do that all of these practices were part of how our district has determined that we can appropriately support local food access. So all of the decisions about making these adaptations in education have been because we see them as important tools in supporting local food access and working within our local food system. So the very first workshop that we put on last spring, we had a participant ask ahead of time if we could offer closed captioning, which prompted us to check out how that might work. We were all learning how to use virtual programming. Because of this, we've ended up putting all of our workshop slides together using Google Slides and sharing that presentation via GoToMeeting when presenting. It could work on GoToWebinar here as well. Google offers a closed captioning option, which picks up your microphone and your speakers. It's not perfect. As you can see in the screenshot here, it does not gather any punctuation. It has a hard time with proper nouns sometimes, and it is primarily available in English. But it is by and large a super successful way of capturing both the presenter's voice as well as using it picks up speakers, so it picks up any audience questions that come in too. And we've gotten really good feedback from participants about this being a way that the accessibility of the workshop has been enhanced for them. We also realized that these online workshops could be an opportunity to offer a written Spanish language translation that we otherwise wouldn't be able to offer at in-person events. None of our staff are fluent Spanish speakers, and so we've done this instead by writing out sort of our narration for each of the presentations and then translating that and then being able to put that into the chat where all participants could read it. So that is then also captured in the recording, and that becomes a way of us being able to offer this education more broadly through those translations. Both of these functions have really helped us to reach broader audiences with information about how to grow food at home specifically. one of the biggest takeaways that we got from that training about virtual workshops was including activities and thought-stimulating questions throughout your workshops. So we've done this through things like the pictured example here, which was from our Planning a Winter Garden workshop, where we had people kind of in real time drawing their gardens out and talking about them with us. And then one way we've done that a lot, which the polling here sort of replicates, is by asking questions. So we'll ask a question at the beginning, introduce yourself, who are you, where are you coming from? And then we'll also include questions throughout that are helpful for us as presenters too. So again, continuing that theme of getting feedback from your community, from your partners, as well as from your attendees. So asking things like, how experienced a gardener are you? What does your growing space look like? And getting a little bit of a better idea. For me personally, one of the biggest losses of doing workshops online has just been the lack of feedback from audiences and the inability to interact with them that way. So these questions help to replicate that a little bit. And then because we have been using the GoToMeeting where everyone can see everything in the chat, which is different than this webinar function, that has been a really great way that we've been able to see community built between participants as well. So people will say something they're having a hard time with, a weed they're struggling with, a bug they're struggling with, they're unsure how to use kohlrabi or something else in their garden. And sometimes we answer those questions, but also then other community members who are attending the workshop are able to answer those questions too. And it's been a great way of sort of replicating that community that workshops can often provide. We have not had, sometimes this has been a concern for folks, we haven't had any issues with people abusing that chat function, using rude language, saying anything inappropriate, or really even factually incorrect. We usually have 2 to 3 staff on a workshop, and that really helps to be able to moderate that and make sure that we're offering answers to questions too, but it's been great. One way we have built up participation and been able to kind of bolster this education about food access has been to offer our online events in a series style. So this also helps further the topic and support individuals in growing food at home throughout the seasons. In particular, for our NACD grant, we offered a home gardening series last summer that was focused on affordable home gardening, and then managing mud and manure and compost and an urban site, and then ended it with planning a Pacific Northwest winter garden. So this series was really fun. It was really focused on how to affordably grow food at home and manage growing food at home. We really tailored this to the needs of our local community. So again, that feedback. We did that by focusing our education on things like how to container garden, acknowledging that some of our participants might be gardening in boxes on their apartment stoops or balconies, and not just phrasing everything about, well, your in-ground home garden or your several acres that you have access to. So really thinking about the language we were using, thinking about the content of what we were offering, and offering this in the series format. We saw people come back to every one. We had, I was excited by the regular attendance that we had at those. We sometimes had as many as 200 people who would register for a workshop. And then we saw usually about 40% live attendance, but then all of those people could receive the recording too. So that was pretty exciting. I mentioned earlier this idea of resource folders. So I think we all know conservation districts, one of our areas of expertise is that we serve our communities through research and shared information. And at a workshop, that often means I bring a whole bunch of handouts. I bring so many different pamphlets and things that people might want to take home. For our online workshops, we put those all together into a Google Drive for each workshop. So here, this is a picture of the affordable home gardening one. We're able to put so much more into that because I wasn't printing those actually. And that's been a really fun way, to further that education and to create these resource folders that people can come back to in their own time. They can peruse and look through. One thing we've also done in there is that we'll put a whole copy of the slideshow in there so someone can revisit that. And this has also been a great way for us to offer new resources that we've created. So this middle one here at the bottom that you can see was a specialized tool that one of our staff created that was a fertilizer guide and application calculator specifically for container and raised bed gardens. So that we made that for this first affordable home gardening workshop, and then have been able to offer that at a whole bunch of different workshops since then, because it's been such a great guide for people to figure out what to get and how to apply that if what they're growing in are small containers. So it's offered us unique ways to continue sharing information and to really make sure that we are filling that role in our community of being an educator and sharing resources far and wide. Lastly, we've been recording all of our workshops. These recordings and the resource folders for each workshop are then shared on our website, as well as being sent directly to all of the participants. We're really excited about these recordings moving forward because this has created a tool that we are then able to share with anyone at any time. So they're on our website. You can go look at them. Anyone can go look at them. And this has also meant that our technical staff can then send those specific recordings to people seeking out technical assistance. So say they've got a site visit coming up with someone to look at their home garden, they can say, hey, it sounds like this affordable home gardening workshop might be helpful for you. That's an additional resource we can offer. And they'll send that ahead of time so that folks can look through that or watch that before they have their site visit or something like that. Ultimately, I would say we've had really great success with the combination of GoToMeeting as a hosting platform, though something like Zoom works just as well. And we've been very reliant on Google Drive for the recordings, for hosting all of the resource folders, putting in the workshops. It's been a great way to be able to collaborate on things and work on things at the same time. I think a lot of the best practices that we found of doing these adapted workshops at home are things we're going to use moving forward, because even when we start to meet in person, I think we'll continue to offer some virtual events because of this accessibility that we're able to do with that, and that we're able to reach a broader audience. So I'm excited to see how that kind of adapts. I think people are in a little bit of a burnout mode with online education right now, but you know, next winter, people might be ready for a little bit of that again. So we'll see how those adaptations continue to flux. But this has been a really huge way that we've been able to further our reach and offer greater support for local food access, specifically around education for growing food at home. That has been really exciting. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about other ways that our district has been able to support local food access besides education and the community gardens and the school gardens as well. So we also engage in supporting local food access through a variety of infrastructure projects, both virtual and physical. And these have included things like the Farmer's Basket, which was an online consumer directory of local farms that we created at the beginning of COVID last year in response to the fact that markets were changing so quickly for producers, something I imagine many of you saw. So in response to farmers losing things like their wholesale accounts with schools or some local restaurants and things that had to close, we created this Farmer's Basket to advertise those changes to people's revenue stream ideas. So farms that had just started a CSA could then advertise through that. It was really successful. We got a lot of traffic on it, and we decided to update that for 2021. So actually through funding from the commission, we were able to do that and updated it for 2021 and continue to host that as a tool. We've also been working with the Southwest Washington Food Hub to further their outreach to both consumers and farmers. So as you can see in the advertisement on the right here, they are offering things like local gourmet sampler boxes of value-added products and fresh food locally. And we have worked with them to both further that outreach to consumers as well as back to producers to let them know that this is an avenue that they can sell their produce through, or if they have value-added products or meat that they're selling, this is an avenue for them to do that. We are excited to be supporting the local expansion of physical infrastructure as well. Here in Thurston County, this looks like a local ag park that's being constructed in the Tenino area that is going to support local production of value-added products. Support for this and other similar projects comes in the form of both direct work with the partners who are involved in that, as well as outreach and communication with our local legislators. So that's another area that our district fits into supporting local food access, is being able to do that storytelling, being able to talk and connect directly with our local legislators to share what we're seeing on the ground, how we're interacting with people, the needs of our local community. I hope you're starting to see the theme here, how all of these things interconnect and support each other. And then an important component of this is that our staff participates in local and regional networks focused on food access. And this helps us to ensure that we are fitting into the local food system work without duplicating or stepping on any toes. I think this is really important. And I'm really uninterested in any kind of competition or competing with other people who are doing this kind of work. I think that's really counterproductive to what our district does, and especially in working in something as important as the food system and towards food access, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is a really inequitable system that we all are functioning within. How can we further our work within that without, like I say, stepping on any toes or making it any kind of competition? By participating in local and regional networks, we are able to kind of continuously ground truth the work that we're doing and ensure that it's a good fit for our community specifically. By meeting monthly with the local food system network, I'm able to hear about projects that other people are doing, funding they're applying for, how we might fit into that, if there's opportunities for us to partner on anything, and then vice versa, they get to hear about what we're doing also. So that is one of the most important parts of how we successfully work towards food access in our community.
Just a quick, Nora, are you,
Yeah.
okay, never mind, sorry. I was just making sure your slides were advancing. It looks like it is.
Okay, cool, thanks. The last practice I want to highlight that we focus on today is creative partnerships. So actually, right now, I would love to have the second polling question go out. Because real quick, before we talk about that, I just want to hear, do you have community partnerships with other organizations engaging in supporting food access?
Looks like most folks are getting close to filling it out. Remember, you just select that, yes or no.
I guess this question is hard to ask in just a poll. I know districts work with farmers. Farmers are a very important part of food access and food systems. And I'm interested in learning a little bit about kind of other partnerships that you might have too. So if that helps in answering that question.
Yeah. So the question, do you have community partnerships with organizations engaged in supporting food access? All right. Looks like voting has stopped or slowed.
Great.
Stephanie, do you want to report out?
Yeah, so of the people who voted, 79% said yes, that they do have community partnerships with organizations engaged in supporting food access, and 21% said no, they do not.
Cool. I'll be so curious if people want to share at the end a little bit more about what those answers entail. I'm so curious. So our partnerships have been very important. I think I've hinted at or talked directly about this throughout the presentation. In the case of the NACD grant specifically, partnerships have been really crucial and very creative in how we've gotten the work done. Like I said, when I applied for that grant, I approached Bounty for Families with my draft proposal. I asked them for feedback about how I could change it to be of greater assistance to their mission and goals. And then after that meeting, we kind of collectively decided to focus our partnership in the grant around their community garden project and to ask for letters of support from both the City of Yelm, where the garden is, as well as the Chamber of Commerce there. And I feel like this approach and partnership was really crucial to our success and has been both in getting the grant as well as our success in executing that grant. Without those resources and partnerships available because of making those connections, I don't think that this would have been as successful. Throughout the grant, a primary work group has been meeting to especially talk about the garden project. And that has consisted of us at the district, Bounty for Families, the city of Yelm and their parks department in particular, a local organization called GRUB, which some of you may be familiar with, and then the Yelm School District has been really involved and meeting regularly with us as well. Each of these partnerships has brought something unique and has really helped us connect with other partners, broadening that web. And notably, much of this wouldn't be possible, especially the construction of the garden, without an additional $12,000 that the Nisqually Indian tribe granted Bounty for Families. Some of that they had granted prior to us receiving the NACD grant, and then some of that they granted this year in particular for the creation of an ADA and elder accessible pathway to the garden. So each of these partners has brought something different to the table. And again, this is that kind of acknowledging what each of us is good at and what we each can bring and how we each want to be participating in the project. GRUB, or Garden Raised Bounty, is a nonprofit in Olympia that works at the intersection of food, education, and health systems to grow healthy food, people, and communities. That's their mission statement. They got involved in this project as we started discussing the actual construction and layout of the garden, in part because they have a program called the Kitchen Garden Project, where they build garden beds for low-income households and communities. They also support a veterans gardening project called the Victory Farm. And so GRUB has contributed not only all of the garden bed building materials and the base soil, but they also coordinated much of the construction and connected us with an organization called the Mission Continues, which is a veterans volunteer organization, to do some of that construction as well. The city of Yelm has been supporting the garden through things like in making sure that ADA pathway was built, their irrigation system that is in ground in the park where it is, they're continuing to offer water for the garden and literally just hosting the garden, which has been incredibly helpful. And Cody, who is their parks maintenance person, has just been so involved and so excited about it. It's been really great. We've been able to share this project with their city council, who's been really on board. So great support from the city. And then Bounty for Families is the primary coordinator of the garden. They just were able to hire a community garden coordinator for this season, who we are now working with closely for kind of the continued management of produce coming out of the garden. It's been a long-term goal for them to have this garden. They've wanted this garden for 5 years. And so these partnerships and us being able to bring in some technical expertise and some financial assistance and support them in applying for additional financial assistance from the tribe and such has been a way for them to finally realize that goal and for Yelm to realize having this garden. The last couple of weeks, as we've been hanging out in the garden on Saturdays, which is when their farmers market is in the same park, I can't tell you how many people have come through the garden and said, oh my gosh, finally there's a community garden in Yelm. We've wanted this here for years. This is so lovely. And that's been really amazing. We've been able to partner with the local high school. Students from landscaping classes came out and helped us install a native pollinator hedgerow, as well as dig up a bunch of sod that we needed moved. We've worked with other veterans groups who've come in and helped us plant the Moms Club of Yelm. At this point, this is what the partners on this project look like. And as you can see, it is growing. There's just constantly more people being added. The Crossroads Community Covenant Church Food Pantry is receiving a lot of the produce on Saturdays right now. Gordon's Garden Center is voluntarily offering most of the seeds and starts for it. The Yelm FFA is involved. The tribal community garden has come out and helped us plant as well. So partnerships. That's all I'll say about that. It has just been really, really amazing to get to see what is possible through all of these creative partnerships. And I think the thing that then connects us back to this idea of kind of assessing your local food system and how you can be involved in that is that a lot of these partnerships I had no connection with, and our district had never worked with these organizations prior to this. The Mission Continues, we were not familiar with them. The Crossroads Food Pantry, the Yelm Moms Club, none of these organizations did we have previous partnerships with. So even if you answered yes, you do have partnerships with people involved in the food system, broadening that web and realizing the collective impact you can have by strengthening those partnerships or exploring alternative partnerships, creative partnerships with groups you might not work with. The impact can be so much greater. And I think what is also awesome in this specific instance is that these partnerships means that this garden is going to continue to be successful because so many people have been involved in its construction and its ongoing maintenance in its first growing season. You know, I think there's a bit of anxiety, especially with something like a community garden, about how successful it will be and how much people will be able to continue engaging in that space. Will it continue to be productive? You know, the city is a little anxious. Is it going to become an eyesore or something like that? But because of all these partnerships, I have no fear of that because there's so many people who are invested in this project that it just is going to continue one way or the other, which is a really great feeling, especially for a project we've been so heavily involved in and have our name on, that we know this is going to continue to be a great community resource. The garden in this instance is specifically designed to be an educational space where people can come and take produce if they'd like, but also we're working on installing a seed shed so people can take seed home from there. The garden beds that are built by Grub are examples of the garden beds they can have built at their home through Grub. So it's really designed to be an educational and example space. And then hopefully there'll be some additional space in Yelm in the future where people can manage their own garden beds and kind of the more traditional community garden sense in the future. So at this point, I would really love if you wanted to look in the handout section and you can see there is Day 3 Speaker 1 White worksheet, which is the handout that I've created for this. And at this time, if you want to download that and take a look at it, there are a variety of different questions in there. I've highlighted a bunch of examples of how I might answer those questions, I think, through my presentation, so you can get a sense of what our work looks like. And if you want to take time to work on filling that out right now, that's awesome. If you want to take that and fill that out later, or if there's a team member who's not here with you today that you want to work on that with, then I hope that's a tool you can use moving forward. But I'd really love to create space in the rest of our time here today to either work on that worksheet together or answer your questions. And hopefully you have a clear idea. Maybe we can work on that a little bit, and then the third poll question kind of comes after that, if that sounds okay to you, Kelsey.
I think that'd be great. So folks, as a reminder, in the handouts tab of your toolbar for the GoToWebinar app, you'll see multiple handouts there, but Day 3 Speaker 1, that's the worksheet she's referring to. You can download as a PDF. If you want to take a few minutes, let's say at 9:50,
Yeah.
you know, that gives you a good, 7-8 minutes to just start jotting down some thoughts that you've got, some preliminary thoughts. If you'd rather just kind of like in that space of reflection, take some time and just jot notes down on a piece of paper, sticky note, that's what I'm going to do, just to get some ideas flowing. And then maybe at 9:50 or slightly before, we can come back so that we at least have 5 minutes of space for either some sharing or some questions, which I'm sure questions will come in before we transition. Does that sound good?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna get started on my end here too.
Okay, great.
If anyone's having trouble for some reason downloading that worksheet and would like to have me insert some of the questions into the chat box to you all, just raise your hand. If I see enough hands raised, or at least one hand raised, I'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I'll assume you guys have it.
I can also email anyone this as a Word document too. And I could even do that right now if someone needs.
You can mention that too in the questions box, folks, if you would like it emailed to you, if you don't have ease of access from the handouts. So again, as a reminder, we're going to take the next probably 5-ish minutes or so to start reflecting on Nora's worksheet about how you are supporting food access or could in your conservation district. And then we'll come back together. Nora, what you might consider doing is actually, if you can share your screen with that worksheet as part of the share screen, that might also be
Oh,
helpful for folks.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, like that.
Okay, great. I'll zoom out a little bit too.
Perfect, thank you.
This is most of the questions. I think there's like, I like sub questions, as you can probably tell. It's my stream of consciousness thinking. So hopefully they're helpful to you too.
That's always helpful.
Yeah.
Deanna, you mentioned you can't download the worksheet. So a thought is if you're willing in the questions box to provide your email, then we'd be happy to email that to you directly. For the meantime, though, I believe Nora is sharing her screen so you can at least see some of the questions. Oh, great, we've got her email.
Okay.
So, Nora, I'm going to message you her email so you can send that directly. Does that work for you?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Is
So
there
it'll
a way that I don't want to necessarily like share my whole email.
No, what I'll do is in the chat box to you, you'll receive a message from me.
Oh, gotcha.
And it'll provide Deanna's email so that you can, so look in the chat box, you'll see it there and you can pop that over to her.
Great.
Just about 3 more minutes of reflection time on that worksheet. All right, take about 1 more minute to wrap up some thoughts. And Nora, I'm not sure if there's a particular question we might want to focus on just because of time.
Yeah, totally. Well, we could deploy the last polling question, which also is sort of general, asking people if they have some good
Perfect.
ideas based on this.
Those just popped up, by the way, for everybody. So the last polling question is there on your screen. If you'd like to take a minute to read that and give us your answer just to get us read back engaged. Do you have a clearer or new idea how you might further your CD's work to support food access after Nora's workshop? So go ahead and fill that poll question out. We'll just take another 30 seconds or so to collect folks' final votes. Awesome. I'm starting to see more folks go in there.
Cool.
All right, 10 more seconds. All right, Steph, do you mind closing that? What we got?
So of the people who voted, 100% said yes. They do have a clearer and new idea. Yep, all voted.
Cool. Well, I'm really curious what some of those ideas are. So if anyone wants to raise their hand and unmute, yeah, what are you thinking? Who would you like to partner with? What projects are you excited about?
And remember, and that's in the attendees tab. There's like a little hand that right
Thank
now
you.
is currently blank, and then we can unmute you when you raise your hand. Oh, good, awesome. Ron, you should be able to unmute yourself at this point, hopefully. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Ron.
Hey, Ron,
Schultz.
we can hear you.
Great. Hi, Nora.
Hi.
You just wanted some contribution based on what I've heard today, and I think it's got me, your presentation has got me even more motivated to want to set up that state caucus and be able to share this kind of information with all the districts and other districts sharing information on a regular basis, and maybe even get organized that we can start tapping into some real money for everybody.
Totally cool. I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. One thing that came to mind for me, just to get folks' kind of minds flowing, is trying to better define my conservation district's role within that food systems work that we're definitely a part of. Just trying to understand where it is that our strengths are and where we're not maybe overlapping or duplicating efforts. So that was actually a question that I had thought about for you, Nora, was, you know, where you see Thurston's role being and what part of that food systems work you take ownership on and strengthen the ownership of the other partners, the food banks and the food gardens and the school gardens. And yeah, so how does that work in defining those ownership roles?
I think that's such a good question. And this is partially why I started with like a little bio that I'm also a farmer and someone who's been doing a lot of research about people's interactions with food, because for me personally, doing this work at the district, I'm like, yeah, we should be involved in everything. I'm excited about everything about a food system, but that's really overwhelming in reality for me to like try to engage in too many components of food access or food system support. And so it's really helpful for me to have questions like what I included on the worksheet to kind of refocus, like when I'm at work and I'm wearing this hat and I'm doing this work, how can our district best be involved in this in a way that actually supports our community and is supportive of the community, meaning it's supporting what everyone else is doing too. So we are not designed to be the best organization to do new research about crop trials. That's an extension service. So extension is the right person for somebody like locally the Hockey Farmers Collective to partner with to do trials about growing indigenous grains for diasporic African populations in our community. That's like a specific project they're doing that is totally focused on culturally relevant food access that we can support by doing things like offering soil testing services for the Hockey Farmers Collective, or making sure that they get invited to be stakeholders in conversations for local farmers about how to reach more people. But we are not the organization to help them do those grain trials. WSU and Cascadia Grains is the right person for them to partner with that. So thinking a little bit about, like, me personally, I'm excited about all those projects. I want to be involved in them. But when I'm working at the district, what's the best way for us to be involved is through technical assistance, through education, through partnerships, and helping people. You know, I really often think about the work we do as kind of like we're a pass through of a lot of information. So if someone calls me and says, like, I'm looking for information about how to grow quinoa or how to grow, you know, other culturally specific grains. Quinoa is not a good example because that's a South American grain, so apologies. But you know, that kind of like specific information that we might not hold, a role we can really play is making sure that they have access and know about these other things. So a big part of our job is just to know what other people are doing to be able to pass that information along.
That's great, thank you. Remember, you can raise your hand, we can unmute you to ask questions or share your thoughts about work you're doing at your district in the food systems realm. You can also type that into the questions box, and we'd be happy to have Nora look at answering that.
Yeah. And I put my email stuff up here too, so please feel free to give me a call or email me too.
Yeah.
Kelsey wrote a great question during your presentation as well. She asked, does the Farmer's Basket of Buyers Guide have any overlap with the other regional marketing initiatives like Washington Food and Farm Finder?
Yeah, I think it's kind of up to farmers if they wanted to be listed in that. So I think that there is overlap locally, like there's certainly overlap with the farm map that the Community Farmland Trust creates. We focused it very locally to mostly farms that are within Thurston County. A lot of those guides are beyond that. We also included in there farms that are not selling food. So there are flower farms, there's fiber farms, there's farms that are selling other value-added products, or that are, you know, also have things like breeding livestock available. So it's not solely food focused, but it is largely food focused. And yeah, it's sort of just like another avenue. I think that that is probably the most duplicative thing that we're doing because other people are doing something like that. But the idea is just like more advertising for people, another avenue to get things out. Yeah, so I think it is kind of duplicative, but I think it is also just another avenue of advertising, and it's been helpful for farms, so we have continued to offer it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
And just kind of a final, just because we're getting close to the end of time here, but one thought that came to mind at the beginning was with so many different potential partners and potential funding sources, have you encountered in your work any kind of food systems grant work hubs, like a place where a staff person at a district could go to see, you know, food systems based grant application opportunities?
No, but if someone has that, I would love to see it.
Darn it, I was hoping you
Yeah.
had.
I also haven't really looked for that specifically. This last year, you know, we've been super blessed to have this NACD grant, which if you, Washington districts have been really successful in applying for those. And I will say that has been one of the most relaxed grantors to ever work with.
Great.
we have gotten huge extensions for that funding that has made it more impactful. So actually they extended our funding through October of 2021 because our community partners said, can you keep being there on Saturdays to help support the community garden? So we're able to stretch it and be able to offer even more support for that garden than we knew we were going to be when we thought we just had 1 year. So they have been the chillest and easiest grantor to ever work with. So I highly recommend people applying for that grant.
Well, that's awesome. And Nora, thank you so much for your time. This
Yeah.
was really informative. It was awesome to provide that structure. It's definitely helped me think more about the food systems work at my district, and I'm sure it has for others. So thank
I
you.
hope so. Awesome. Yeah, please feel free to reach out. Thanks for being such an excellent moderator, Kelsey. And I'm sorry to not see y'all in person, and I hope to next year.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be happening.
Cool.
All
Well,
right.
have a wonderful day, y'all.
Yeah, you too, Nora.
Bye.
Bye.